On today's show, the second day of the 2024 NBA draft is in the books. AJ Griffin is no longer a member of the Atlanta Hawks, and they do add a second-round pick and an interesting player. We'll get into all that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1751 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday evening here in late June. The 2024 NBA draft is now over. Day one, day two, it is all in the books at this point in time. The offseason is firmly here. And of course, today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase with Gametime. Terms apply. Also, want to tell you at the top of the podcast, as I always do on this show, to check out Locked On Hawks anywhere you might find your podcast. Make it your first listen each and every day. Find us on YouTube. We can also like this episode of the podcast, as well as subscribe to the show moving forward, as well as on Apple on the audio side and Spotify, Overcast, etc. It's been very busy on this podcast for quite some time now. We did a full slate of pre-draft content, which I recommend still listening to now. There's still plenty of good insight in those episodes. And then after day one of the draft, I was on site at the Hawks facility. I did a podcast last night on Wednesday evening talking about the Hawks number one overall pick, Nikola Djurišić, as well as what Landry Fields had to say about that, all the machinations there, the latest intel, etc. Day two was not quite as historic for Atlanta. No number one overall pick in this number two, sort of day number two class. But there were some transactions, and probably a little bit of a shorter episode, I will say, as I'm trying to get this done in sort of bonus knockout fashion on a Thursday evening. But there were two transactions kind of in one. So all that said, we'll dive in now. And the lead story on this Thursday is that AJ Griffin is no longer a part of the Atlanta Hawks roster. So I've referenced a few times in the last couple of weeks on the show and also on Patreon, where you can find me at patreon.com/BTRowland, that I've had my eye on AJ Griffin and potentially being traded at some point in the offseason. I wasn't guaranteeing it or anything like that, but I referenced it last night on the show on this same feed, wherever you listen to this podcast. At the end of the show, I talk about AJ kind of being a potential trade guy, maybe even as soon as today. And because of that, I kind of saw it coming on some level. I was not surprised. Some were for sure. I was a little bit surprised that they only got the number 44 overall pick in the draft for AJ. I will say that. I probably would have guessed if you told me he was going to get traded today, it would have been a pick somewhere in the 30s if I had to guess. But clearly that pick was not available to them. They took the deal that was offered to them at number 44, which became 43 later on. But that was done about 2 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday when it was reported by Woj and quickly confirmed by me and others that it was going to be just straight up AJ for the 44th pick in the draft. AJ was set to make about $4 million or so in his third season. And the Hawks also, I think, sneakily had to decide on his fourth-year option by October, which is about $6 million. Not crazy money, but certainly not nothing. And I'm not sure if that was going to be a pickup for them or not. I wasn't going to be, most of the time, first-round picks, their options get picked up most of the time, but it was not going to necessarily be a lock that would happen. And look, anyone that's followed this team closely will know this, but if you haven't, I'll just kind of give you the broad strokes here. It was kind of a lost season for AJ Griffin. So many people have asked me this question broadly, like, how does a guy who goes 16th in the draft 2 years ago get traded for the 44th pick 2 years later? And it was all basically about this last season. So he wasn't great at Summer League a year ago, last July. He wasn't great in October or November. It was a little bit strange. He wasn't awful, but just wasn't playing very well. And then he had the lengthy personal absence. So he was gone away from the team for several weeks, kind of under the cloud of mystery. We didn't really, the Hawks, and look, this is AJ's right for sure. It was deemed to be a personal absence. The Hawks respected that privacy of AJ. Didn't really release any details about that. He did one interview when he came back, but not a ton of details. There was family stuff that was reported out there. Mental health stuff potentially was speculated on, all that stuff. But we'll never know the full details there, I wouldn't guess. But he didn't play basketball for quite some time and was clearly struggling personally on some level. He came back, but was basically completely off the radar for the Hawks as far as basketball was concerned for most of the season after that. He did go to the G League in February, showed some signs. I thought he played better there and showed some physical stuff that was better than he was early in the year, played with a little bit more confidence. But I was hearing even back then, like pre-deadline in February, that he was potentially going to be moved by the Hawks at that point in time. It didn't happen, but that has never really stopped. And look, there is basketball stuff too. So AJ functioned much better and much more naturally, I would say, for his skill set and his tendencies under Nate McMillan. So this doesn't mean that Nate is better than Quinn. In fact, he's not, in my opinion. But Nate ran a much more methodical. They didn't really run as much. It was not as based on tempo and quick decisions, etc. And AJ kind of plays at his own speed right now. He's not a fast twitch guy, never has been. He's a processor that's kind of a little bit slower, more plotting. Quinn likes to play faster again. AJ didn't really take to that immediately. We saw that even last year when Quinn came in midseason the previous year and basically fell out of the rotation by the end of the year. And, I talked about this a lot at the time because everybody was healthy at that point in time, which is a far cry from now, or at least it hasn't been recently for the Hawks. Quinn wanted to play 9 guys, and he basically had to choose between Jalen and AJ. And at the time, it seems crazy now because of Jalen's ascent, but that was a real decision. AJ had been playing more and, was probably a little bit ahead of Jalen for part of that season, and then Jalen came back. Anyway, he fell out of the rotation a little bit there. It was the same this year, even before the personal absence. He was not playing a lot, which was kind of surprising, but not totally shocking. And look, AJ is still a very talented guy. The shooting is real. The wing, being a wing who could shoot it and had that pedigree as a former top 5 prospect in his class, that's all interesting. He's also very young. He's younger than a lot of guys who were drafted in the last 2 days, for instance. But for me, I think he needed to change the scenery. I think AJ, if he was going to kind of fix his career and get back on the right track, it might have been needed to go somewhere else just to have a change of scenery, different coach, different situation, all that stuff. I'll be rooting for AJ to succeed, I got to say. I think he could revive his career in Houston, but the reaction of people who don't follow the Hawks closely last year and in particular overall is different than people around the team. People around the team or people that cover the team closely are not as surprised. They noticed this year was kind of a completely lost season. He barely played, and it wasn't really injury. He had a couple injuries too, but it wasn't injury only as to why he wasn't playing. So all that said, I understand it doesn't look good. It is what it is. To have a guy be drafted in the first round, middle of the first round 2 years ago, and then have him be gone by year 3 and be traded for a mid-second round pick, especially after he was really good. And that's something I should at least note. AJ had a good rookie season, like a good rookie season on a team that was trying to win. He played well. He was efficient. And yeah, he's always had some questions defensively in particular, slow feet, not the greatest athlete in the world, but he managed to play rotation minutes as a rookie and do it pretty well. And obviously a big fall since then. So I'll stop there as far as like what's going to happen now. Obviously, AJ is going to be in Houston, and hopefully he'll do well for his sake. But yeah, second year was kind of rough, and all that kind of stuff happens in the NBA. This is not the first time this is going to happen, nor will it be the last. With regard to a guy that maybe has a nice strong rookie season, kind of falls off and gets moved on from change of scenery, etc. But that is the story now about what transpired there with regard to AJ. We'll have more on what happened next because the Hawks, after they traded for the pick that became number 44 for the AJ trade, they made another small move. It actually became a 3-team trade on the whole, and they added a pretty interesting prospect that we'll get into in a second. But first, a word from our partners on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace at the NBA, and that makes getting tickets for basketball, baseball, etc. faster and much easier for you. They have killer last-minute deals. They have all-in prices, views from receipts, and the lowest possible price guarantee, and that makes Gametime a fantastic option. It makes things easy for you across the board. I've been using them for a long time at Gametime, and it really has come in handy for me for concerts, for shows, for Braves games, Falcons games, United games, etc. It's all been there at Gametime. And save big there when it comes to last-minute tickets on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have flash deals. They have the ability to kind of toggle to have the prices being shown in all-in fashion, so you know exactly what you're paying before you get to the end of the checkout screen. Also, you have this panoramic view of your seats in the app before you buy them, and you are also getting the lowest possible price guarantee with the folks at Gametime. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase with Gametime. Terms apply. Again, create that account and read that promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, and about 3 hours after the Hawks moved on from AJ Griffin and that deal was reported, it wasn't announced yet, but it was finalized. We knew about that at that point in time. 3 hours later or so, middle of the second round, number 44 overall, and it's coming up. And it ended up being a small trade for the Hawks to go from 44 up to 43, and they added some cash considerations to move up one spot. Now, you might be confused by this because it's not happened for a long time for the most part. The Hawks sent cash in this trade. That's a welcome change in previous years, I would say. If you are a longtime listener, you will probably know that I have done some rants in the past about the Hawks selling draft picks or making financial decisions based on acquiring just cash that can't be used for basketball, that just kind of goes in the owner's pockets, for instance. No rant today. They used cash smartly to move up a spot and get their guy along the way here. So technically structured as a 3-team deal with Houston, who got AJ Griffin, and then Miami at the end of that. And they drafted Nikola Djurišić. So it's Nikola Djurišić, I believe is the way it's supposed to be pronounced. My apologies there. Not a native speaker, obviously, but that's the pronunciation guide that the NBA gave out. 20-year-old wing from Belgium by way of Serbia. He played at Mega in the last few years. The same team this year that had Nikola Djurišić, who went in the lottery to Oklahoma City. Actually, Djurišić was actually in the draft last year, ended up withdrawing, and then coming back, playing at Mega, and then obviously staying in the draft this time around. Mega's kind of a prospect factory in some ways. They're kind of geared towards promoting young guys and structuring around them, making them look good, etc. They build around those young guys in a way a lot of teams don't overseas. And actually, Djuricic's numbers went way up this year when Topic got hurt, which actually happened later in the year, because then Djurišić was kind of the primary guy when Topic was actually sitting, and his counting stats went way up. Broadly speaking, I'll say this, and we'll come back to it later on, I'm sure. I like this bet for the Hawks. He has some actual creation upside that you will not find with a lot of picks in the 40s, I would say. Obviously, there's downside too, or he wouldn't have been available at this point in time. And look, not everything is perfect here, but like people that I trust and their evaluations who have watched him more than I have, like this pick compared to like where, at 44, 43, 44 to where he was actually going. So Brian Schroeder's been on this podcast many times, had him in the 20s. I think Ben Pfeiffer as well had him in the 20s. Sam Vecini, I know, had him 37th in his draft guide, so higher than where the Hawks drafted him. So what does that tell you? We'll see, but there are people that I trust that like the player and the prospect and the upside. As far as like what Djurišić is going to look like in the NBA, only time will tell, but I've seen him enough to be dangerous here. Talk about him a little bit here. A good athlete with real wing size, about a 6'7" in no shoes, which is a very solid wing size. Not a huge wingspan, 6'8", but that's fine for where he is as kind of a pure wing, not a forward, like definitely going to be a 2-3 in the NBA kind of thing. If it gets there, has multi-level scoring acumen, I would say. Not shy in a good way. He's very aggressive, attacking, shooting, hunting a shot, and with good reason. I like his passing as well. He sees passing lanes. They're not always there to everybody. Not an elite passer, but certainly someone who's not afraid to pass and can definitely make good reads. Pretty good finishing numbers. A pretty good athlete again. Like can jump around the rim and finish. One of the questions with him is his perimeter shooting, which is not fantastic right now. He shot 31% from three this year. Has never shot a high percentage from three at any level that I can find. It's not broken as far as mechanics are concerned, but the ball has not gone in for him a ton. Doesn't mean it can't, but not a whole lot of evidence of him being a high-level shooter. He probably would have gone earlier in this class, for instance. Defensively, he's not special, but I think he could be fine. I think he's not, inattentive. Again, a pretty good athlete, has enough length, enough physicality. He's probably, if anything, like kind of over-eager, which is better than the other way around. What you don't want is someone who doesn't care defensively. I think he's pretty aggressive, like he has an offense, like kind of maybe over-rotating or being overly aggressive, getting fouls, etc. But I don't mind that. I'm going to watch more, of course. But from what I've seen, it makes total sense to me to take a swing on him at this pick in the 40s. He was certainly one of my 2 or 3 highest rated guys remaining when the Hawks got to that spot. And look, in the second round, the bands are very narrow. Like people were like holding their breath for certain guys. And yeah, there was a few guys that I thought might get to Atlanta that I actually had higher than Djurišić, but they didn't get there. So it's like, and also it's kind of a crapshoot in the second round. I don't mean that in a negative way. I've actually said for a long time that a lot of teams kind of wave away the second round, and they probably shouldn't. But you got to know you're not going to be getting a lock of a guy that's going to help you for sure. It's about either taking upside swings, which I think is more what Djurišić is, or guys that you could think can kind of help you pretty soon. So like last year, I always use the Hawks as an example on purpose. Last year, the Hawks did Moguet as the upside swing and Seth Lundy as more of the like projectable wing player, not sky high upside, but has NBA skills. And with Lundy, it was a jump shot. Djurišić, it's definitely kind of a combination, I would say. Probably a little bit more upside based, but there are different kinds of projects there and second round picks. But I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And again, it's hard to expect anything with a pick in the 40s. The median projectable outcome for this pick is not going to be a huge NBA contributor, but there is upside here. I would say I'm in favor of just looking at wings in general. Obviously, Ricochet is different in that he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So there's a different expectation level there, a different baseline there. And I talked about him extensively yesterday on the show, and I promise you I'll be talking about him a lot in the coming days. But even, Djurišić and Seth Lundy last year, you got Vit Krejci's been in the system a couple times. Just keep swinging on wing players and hope you hit some. I saw some people on YouTube, Twitter, etc. They were kind of like they wanted a center or they wanted to go. Look, I get that too. But there's nothing wrong with having a bunch of wings. If there's a spot you can't have too many of, it's wings, especially second round wings. Like just add, hopefully you'll hit on a couple of these guys. But in the end, just keep throwing your resources at wings. And I don't mind that whatsoever. I think Djurišić, again, has a path to being an NBA player. We will see if he actually gets there, but notable that they found a pretty talented guy in the second round using the pick that they that they acquired for AJ Griffin earlier in the day. Okay, we'll get into some final thoughts on today's podcast with regard to the luxury tax side of things, because they did save some money in the AJ trade, and people were kind of talking about tax stuff today. I saw like Bobby Marks, etc. We're getting a little bit of that in a second, and then also kind of preview Friday, because when the Hawks are going to actually introduce their prospects to the media, we'll see how that's going to go. But first, a word from our partners on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors and passion driving patience with the formula for winning championships. And that's also what keeps your ride or die vehicle alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle as well as leveling it up to peak performance. They have everything you're looking for, really everything you're looking for your vehicle, no matter what kind of car or truck or SUV you might have. They have superchargers, they have roof racks, they have exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so many more things, whether it's into speed or power or style that you're actually focused on. eBay Motors has you covered across the board. They have over 122 million parts. 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for at eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you're also guaranteed to have that part fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money is coming back to you. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, but you are really not burning cash. With all the parts that you need, the price that you're looking for, it's easy to turn that car that you have into the MVP and bring home that win that you are seeking. Keep your ride or die alive right now at ebaymotors.com. One more time, the place to go is ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Physical, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, and before we get out of here, I'm not going to do the long version of this, but I got a lot of questions today about, like, for instance, I almost used one specific in particular, but and I saw people asking other Hawks folks this as well. Was the AJ trade financially motivated? I mentioned AJ's salary earlier, about $4 million this year. That's not life-changing money as far as the cap is concerned. It is more than the minimum, comfortably, of course. But the short answer to that is, could it have been a factor of some kind? Yes. But they are not just trading AJ to save money. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. It could be a factor. I wouldn't put it past them. I think they're going to be pinching pennies on some level to avoid the tax at some point, if I had to guess. But AJ, it wasn't like an overwhelming salary, but maybe it played a small part in what they actually took for him or what they got back for him, potentially second-round picks, all that stuff. As far as what the situation is now, because there was conflicting stuff that I saw out there, some mistakes I saw from people kind of tweeting just nonchalantly about this. The Hawks are still, even after trading AJ for no salary back, projected to be over the tax line right now. So 10 guys that under contract right now. Take AJ away, not adding in Djurišić yet. 10 guys, that includes the number one overall pick because it's a kind of a fixed cost at $12.5 million or so with Ricochet. 10 guys, $167 million in those 10 guys. Bruno and Garrison Matthews have non-guaranteed deals at this moment in time for a couple more days. If they are kept, it would be about 172 or so with 12 players on the roster. As a reminder, you have to have at least 14 guys under contract that you are paying. So you can't just have 12 guys, and you have to pay 13 and 14. Even if it's the minimum, it's more than $1 million even for the rookie minimum. So that takes you over the tax line, because the tax line is about 171.3. So even with taking AJ away, not adding Djurišić, and you are still comfortably over the tax, doing nothing else. And that does not include a single dollar for Vit Krejci nor Saddiq Bey. And I'm not sure they're going to bring Bey back. I'm pretty darn sure Vit will be back, if I had to guess. I'm not saying it's 100%, but certainly leans that way from what I've heard. So factor him into filling out the roster, etc. Because they used cash in the trade, and this is a hat to Keith Smith of Spot Track, to get Jurisic in the trade actually today. The Hawks are now hard capped technically at the second apron above the tax line. What does that mean? Basically, it means that the Hawks cannot exceed the second apron for any reason. It's now a hard cap versus a soft cap, which is usually what the NBA is. That does not, however, practically matter because there was no chance, and I'm not leaving it, there was no chance the Hawks were going to go over the second apron this year anyway. 0% chance. And now it really can't happen, but they weren't going to do that anyway, so the penalty there is basically nothing. Anyway, we also don't know this. I purposely held this to the end. Jurisic doesn't have to come over right now. So there's this concept of draft and stash. 95% of the time, it's not a college guy in America that does this. It's a European or international or South American, Australian, Asian player, someone that's not from the United States. There's always this question of, are they going to come over or not? Because he's been making money overseas. He's been a pro overseas. I've been asking around since the actual draft, and I'm recording this podcast at like 8:30 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. I have not gotten a straight answer yet about whether he's going to come over for this year. There is at least a chance he stays overseas, and it's sort of a draft and stat situation. Based on what I know right now, I would slightly lean to him coming over, but I don't know. So I'll just be honest with you about that. But he could sign a two-way. He could sign a second-round pick exception contract like they did with Mo Gay last year, where basically he's signing for the minimum, but for multiple years. Like, for instance, Mo Gay got a 4-year deal last year at number 39 overall, but it was a 4-year deal that was quite team-friendly. 2 years of guaranteed money and then some non-guarantees, a club option at the end of it. That's kind of the Hinkie special of sorts from back in the day with Sam Hinkie in Philadelphia. So we'll see what that looks like. But the Hawks might be interested in having Jurisic on a full contract at the rookie minimum, because rookie minimum deals are cheaper than veteran minimum deals. The cheapest contract you can have for a full season in the NBA is a rookie minimum deal. And he's the only player that can sign that deal right now. Maybe if they sign somebody else that was not drafted, that could happen. But keep that in mind. We'll see if that actually happens. But that would be helpful if they're trying to stay under the tax line maybe later on. But just to be very clear, trading AJ does not get the Hawks under the tax. It saves the money, but it's not necessarily all the way there. And by the way, even if I got a question about this as well, even if the Hawks wanted to cut Bruno and Garrison, which I would not do, to be clear, they still couldn't stay under the tax without another move somewhere else to cut money. And it doesn't mean you have to be only cutting money. Like, you can make a trade in which you save money that's also a basketball trade. It doesn't have to be a straight salary dump like we've seen before with the Hawks with John Collins or Kevin Huerter, which they got a pick for. Keep that in mind. The Huerter deal was always better than the Collins deal because they actually got a pick for Kevin Huerter. But it doesn't have to be that. It could be that, but we'll see. Just lots of questions about that. Want to at least answer that at the end of the podcast. But yeah, I mean, hold on tight, I would say. As of an hour ago or so, the Hawks updated their announcement. Jurisic is supposed to now be in attendance for the press conference on Friday morning. So I referenced this last night, but Risa Shea and now Jurisic are going to be introduced formally at their press conference on Friday morning at 11 a.m. at the Hawks facility. It'll be the Bob Rathman show. My guy, Bob Rathman, as the MC of that event. I believe it's going to be live on Hawks.com. At least the Hawks have said that. I don't know if it's going to be happening, but I assume it will be. So keep that in mind. And that'll be interesting. We'll see how much news there is from that. Maybe we find out about Jurisic coming over. But news-wise, I tend to keep my expectations pretty low. But obviously some non-news stuff, like people want to get to know Risa Shea in particular, I'm sure, as the new guy in town, number one overall pick. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about his experience in Atlanta and coming over to the U.S. and all that stuff. It'll be interesting. But as far as news is concerned, we'll see how much of that comes up. And obviously, just to say the very clear thing, the Hawks have other business to take care of. The draft has now come and gone, but they have decisions to make that we'll talk about probably tomorrow on the show, about Saddiq Bey, about Vit Krejci, about Seth Lundy, about Bruno, about Garrison Matthews. That's all happening by Saturday. So, that's happening. Free agency begins on Sunday. You got the Trey and DeJounte thing. You got the Clint Capella and Okongwu thing. You got the DeAndre Hunter situation. All of that is up in the air. Vit Krejci maybe signing, Saddiq, all that stuff. Keep it locked here. We'll have much more in the future. Please subscribe to this podcast. A little bit shorter today, I know, but please stay tuned. I'm planning to do a show probably tomorrow night. If something happens before that, I will jump into action over the weekend. Usually I'm not doing podcasts, but obviously this is going to be a big weekend. So if a trade happens, I'll be jumping into action there as well. And then Summer League schedule will be out pretty soon, I'd imagine. All that stuff's going to be coming. So stay tuned. Please subscribe to the show. Tell a friend about the podcast. Like the show on YouTube. Check us out on Apple and Spotify and Overcast. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. I'm currently locked out on my Twitter account right now for bizarre reasons. I'm not really sure why, but I'm at BT Rowland if you want to find me there as well. Thank you for listening, everybody. I definitely appreciate everyone checking out the show, especially in the last month, but really always. And we'll see you all next time.